Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. We're thrilled today to have Cam Doody from Brickyard. Cam, why don't you give us a quick intro about you and Brickyard and where you're coming from and how you got to do what you're doing?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Pumped to be here. It's great to get to sort of be in person with you a bit. We've been working together for the past year or so on a few deals, but it's great to actually get some FaceTime. So thanks for having me. My background is not. I never thought that I'd be a venture investor. I've been an operator for the last 10 years. So I started Bellhop back in 2012.
Yeah.
We took the venture path, raised a bunch of venture over the last decade, sold part of the company right before COVID. That's when my co-founder and I stepped out of the day-to-day. We're still on the board of Bellhop, but Bellhop's big tech-enabled moving and relocation business that we started originally in Birmingham and then moved it to Chattanooga, Tennessee back in late 2012 before we raised the majority of our venture. But we took about a year off. We had a pretty unique first few years building our company. Our first investors had started a sort of a precursor to what Brickyard is today, but it was a venture firm, was place-based, in person. It was sort of this residency thing where if they wrote a check into your company, you had to relocate to Chattanooga and build out of their space. So they had a whole floor on an old building. We were one of 10 investments that they made over about a 3.5 year period. I think we were the second or third investment they made. 7 of those companies are now well north of $100 million businesses and are doing super well. So the hit rate for Lampposts, what it was called, was just insane. And we attribute
that success to. I mean, and I've noticed a similar thing with Brickyard. I mean, you guys are one of my closest collaborators. I collaborate with you guys all the time. Your deal flow is stellar. I mean, I hope I'm sending you as good of deals as you're sending me. But if Matt or it's usually Matt who sends me the deal, I'm like, yeah, that's amazing. I'd love an intro. What do you attribute that to? Is it the culture of just having had a successful, startup and then Lamppost? Tell us about that.
I'll cover Lamppost first, and then we can talk Brickyard. Lamppost was there was something magic with how it was structured, where if they wrote a check, you had to move your company to Chattanooga, and you had to work out of their space. And then once you were there, it wasn't like a WeWork. You were just surrounded by other teams that were in your exact stage. And we all became super close. There was no like posturing or positioning. It wasn't like a typical accelerator cohort where
it's kind of like joining basic training at the Army. It's like you're all shaving your heads and
yeah, I mean, but it was like no one it wasn't like, okay, we're here for 10 weeks and we're all killing it. And like there was no positioning. It was like, we're here to build big businesses. And we loved each other and we saw each other go through really tough times. Like we'd be having a terrible week. One of our sister companies, in Lamppost would be having an incredible week, and that would push us. And so it was this hyper competitive environment where but everybody really loved each other. So it was like being around your brothers and sisters, but you want to dunk on them every day. And so, it just created this really fantastic environment. So we built out of, the first 4 years of Bellhop, we built out a Lamppost. And I think when we left, we probably had 50 employees, and we were just kind of bursting at the seams, and we were right at, product market fit. And so we experienced something pretty magical, and we knew that we were going to do it again, but we were all super busy building our companies. And so when we right before COVID, when we sort of became free agents again, it was like we knew that we were going to do it again. So we started talking about it. And so we bought a building on the south side of Chattanooga, a much bigger space than we had before at Lamppost. And we built what we wished that we had in the early days. and so it's about 12,000 square feet it's a standalone building. It's an old Persian rug warehouse. And we put in a gym and locker rooms and showers. We put in like cold plunge and a sauna, and like sounds like super, frilly, but like the culture of Brickyard is like pretty hardcore. And then the rest of the space is just open space for all of our teams to work. So if you're in Brickyard, you're one of our teams. It's almost like a portfolio club. And and so we self-funded our first 16 companies because we didn't know if this was going to work like it did the first time. So our view was the culture of founders has changed so much over the last like 10, 12 years. Like founders, you used to just feel sorry for founders. Like you're just like, shit, keep going. That was like the vibe back in 2012. Like it wasn't this like status oriented. Yeah, like it truly. I mean, there was only one reason to be building venture-backed business, and that was because you're like a neurotic type that just had a company that they had to build. And there wasn't any of this like Forbes 30 under 30, like get Steph Curry in your cap table, jet setting around the country, going to parties. Like
Steph Curry
none of
on
that
some cap
stuff
tables?
existed.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's like venture has changed the space so much that, by our calculus, like 80-90% of founders that are in the space today are probably in it for the wrong reasons. And what venture really is it's a 10-year grind through hell. I mean, it is as hard as you could possibly imagine. And so
are you talking about
there's just a lot of
or venture capital?
Building a company as an operator, as a founder.
Right.
It's just so difficult. I mean, it's even the bigger you get and the faster that you grow, the strain is almost impossible to only other founders can really understand what a founder goes through when they scale a company past, series A, B, C, D, we saw the culture of founders changed immensely over the last 10 years. We wanted to create essentially a series of filters and that's what Brickyard is, where we wanted to end up with the founders that are just the junkyard dogs, like the founders that just will not stop no matter what, because that's what we experienced at Bellhop. Like, we raised $120 million at Bellhop, grew it into a large business, serving almost the entire US. But no part of it was easy. There was no lightning in a bottle aspect to what we did. It was just hard. And
just grinding it out.
So even it's a grind. And we have a lot of analogies for founders around like war, because it's like, most founders today are like, they just strapped on their government issued uniform that's like starched and perfect. And they are like glorifying war, and battle. And like, sure enough, 2-3 months later, they're in the trenches covered in mud and blood. Their buddy's arms just got blown off. It's a huge wake up call. And that's usually, that period is when you go into the trough of sorrow. So I'm sure your listeners are aware of, the trough of sorrow graph. It starts at the peak of disillusionment, where you're just sort of like, you're just in la la land, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're just going to go straight to the moon. And then you fall back into the trough, which is the trough of sorrow. And usually that's like a 2 or 3 year grind towards product market fit. And that's truly like a knife fight.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of uncertainty. And then you get to the wiggles of false hope, and then you hopefully get to product market fit. And, but YC is as good as it gets on getting teams to the peak of disillusionment, that first little pop of, but every YC team, after demo day, they fall into the trough, and then it's like, that's when reality sets in.
Yeah.
No one had focused on the trough.
Yeah.
And so that's what Brickyard really is.
I love that.
We're a residency that's focused on getting teams through the trough of sorrow and the things that we think matter to get to a Series A, which is kind of how we define like PMF. Like, if you can get PMF's a little too ambiguous. Like, if you can get to a Series A, that's kind of when you're seeing some of the early signs of PMF. And so, what we think matters to get to a Series A is radical focus, removing all distraction, and then extreme inputs around hours, just like extreme hours. And because the signals towards PMF are so faint that you have to be
Right.
just consumed by them to understand, like pick up on the little nuanced details of like what direction you may want to go in. And so our take is 100% of our teams should get to a Series A, because the Series A, in our belief, is the only round that you can manifest through just sheer brute force. Like you can go and find early adopters if you want it bad enough.
Yeah.
And so that's,
So
what we tell
your
our
assertion
teams.
there is like every company should be able to get to that, 1, 2, 3 million of ARR just through sheer will and force.
Yes.
I love that.
And if you don't, you just didn't want it bad enough. Like you either didn't put in the work, or you weren't willing to make the hard decisions to, sprint back down a false summit that you climbed and then you start sprinting up the next, mountain. And so it's those two things. And then it's finally like the community, just being around other founders that are truly top tier founders who are in the exact same stage of they're in the trough of sorrow, they're in the knife fight. Being around other founders that are in that grind pushes you. And so those are the three aspects that Brickyard really is. So if we write a check,
I just thought of a name for
move.
what you guys do. It's not an accelerator. Right? We were talking about this before we started recording. I was like, yeah, we're going to talk about the accelerator. You're like, wait, it's not an accelerator. And I was like, okay, what is it? It's an ascender. Like you're ascending people out of this trough to the Series A, right? The accelerator helps you kind of get that first peak, that first hit from YC or whatever coming out at demo day. But then, you're in the trenches, and you need somebody to, like, I don't know, carry you out and be with you and be like, go over the hill.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is there's no one that's going to carry you out of the trough. Like it's truly like it's totally up to you. But if you're surrounded by a bunch of others that are trying to get out of the trough, it sets the bar of how hard you need to be working in order to make it out of the muck, And so, I mean, Matt and me and our other three partners, we're here every day, but we have no standing meetings. There's no programming. There's no demo day. It's just like 24/7 office hours, and we're almost exclusively like set on tactical. Like we actually never want to get involved in strategic discussions with our teams because we just don't have the context that our founders have, and any kind of opinion that we may have on the space of, a pre-product market fit company is probably just going to be ill-informed. Like we just haven't put in the radical amount of thought that it takes to really have insights into what matters strategically. So it's like we're focused on how do you hire your first engineer? How do you build the early org structure? How do you negotiate term sheets? And it's all very tactical, and that's where we really like to live. So yeah.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So it's not an accelerator. It's like an anti-accelerator in a way, or the unaccelerator. Maybe that's not the right term, but it differentiates itself. How do you guys select these companies? Like, what do you guys look for these founders that are coming in? How do you find them, and how do you assess them? And
so I kind of mentioned, we invest across category. We don't really touch hardware or healthcare. But beyond that, we're pretty agnostic in terms of category. But 90% of our decisioning around teams, like we're investing early enough, like it's mostly pre-seed and seed, like probably 60-40 split. It's all about the founder. And so 90% of our decisioning is like, are you a dog? Like, are you a junkyard dog that is willing to do absolutely whatever it takes to grind it out and find a way to win?
what are 3, 4, or 5 characteristics that you've noticed in assessing probably hundreds of founders at this point, or thousands even, where you're like, yeah, this person, this guy, this girl,
Yeah, I mean, it's, we actually have listed this, on our site. Like if you go to justlaybrick.com, like it's pretty explicit, like what we look for. But in terms of like characteristics of founders, it's like heads down, like completely neurotic, heads down. I don't care about any of the fluff of venture capital. I want to build a company. I want to build something big.
Yeah.
The CEO's got to
But
be able
people
to
can say
sell.
that though. Like, anyone can say, yeah, I want to build a big company, but there's this like fire,
Okay,
there's this chip on their shoulder, the why.
for sure. I mean, it comes down to like first 2 minutes of any conversation that we have with a new founder. It's just a series of filters. Like it's just set up. Brickyard's set up to like you only get to Brickyard when you are completely 100% all in to like how we do things. And the first thing we say is like, look, pumped to meet you, Brian. Like really excited to dig into your company. But let me tell you about Brickyard. This is not for everybody. This is requires extreme sacrifice. You have to move here for a minimum of a year, but it's really like a handshake commitment. Like you're here until Series A. Like it's a forcing function to get to Series A
It might be
metrics.
2 years, might be 3 years.
And
Yeah.
the founders here at Brickyard, they're putting in 70, 80, 90-hour weeks every week. And you're going to be surrounded by founders that are maniacs, and it's a it's a very kind of serious environment from a lot of ways. Like, the founders at Brickyard, like they want it bad. And how I know that they want it bad is like when I have this conversation, the first 2-3 minutes of taking a call, founders like either lean in and they're like, yes, it's exactly what I want.
Yeah.
Or like it's a threat to their way of life and they lean out and they start asking questions like, well, what about networking events? And like, what's the startup scene in Chattanooga like? Am I going to be able to meet, investors? It's like, if you want to get to product market fit, none of that stuff matters at all.
Yeah.
Like you have to do the work to build something. And so we pull the ripcord on first calls in the first 5 minutes all day long. Like if I have 10 meetings, probably 6 of them, sometimes 7 of them, I end in the first 10 minutes of a conversation because it's just, I can just tell like
Look,
the
I can just
founder's
tell
just
this
not
isn't going
into
to
it.
be for you. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, that's it. And then
I do that with founder
through the
calls
diligence
sometimes
process.
too, where I'm like, this isn't going to work. I make up an excuse though. I'm nice. I'm like, I got to take my dog to the vet or whatever.
I mean, we're pretty candid with teams, but it's usually like it's not us pulling the ripcord, it's them. Like I can kind of tell that they're not into it, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
hey, totally understand if we want to pull the ripcord here, and it's them that's like, yeah, it's just not going to work, And sometimes it's legit reasons like I have kids in school and I'm in Boston, and there's just no way I'm going to be able. It's like respect, totally get it.
Yeah, I totally get it.
But yeah, I mean, the rest of the way that we find this type is like through our entire diligence process. It's like we kind of layer in the ethos of what Brickyard is, and it's like, it's just kind of a serious thing. And so, I'm pumped to hear that you love the teams that we've sent you.
All of them are great.
But,
They're all stellar. Anytime Matt emails me, I don't even look at the deck. I'm just like, here, just get on the calendar because I know it's a stellar founder.
I love it
every time.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I hope that if we're successful in Brickyard 2 or 3 years from now, no matter if you know us or not, if you see that this is a Brickyard team, you just take the meeting. Because it's like, okay, I don't know if I love this space or not, but I know I'm going to talk to a legitimate founder that's completely all in.
Right.
We're going for
economic deal look like for you guys? Are you guys running a fund and investing for a certain percentage of equity? Is it kind of like a standard YC deal kind of thing, or what's that look like?
Yeah, so we're a fund. So we self-funded the first 16 companies, and then we raised a $20 million fund that we're investing out of now. But we invest on market terms. So there's no standard deal or anything like that. We're taking market terms with teams. And then it's fully subsidized. Like everything with Brickyard is free. There's no like cost to be a part of it. And
so you basically tell founders like, hey, we're going to invest. This is our check size. We're going to take whatever your latest valuation is, whatever it is for this pre-seed round or seed round, and we're going to help you get to A. That's the story.
That's it. Yeah, that's totally it. And then there's a component like the community matters so much. I know I sound like a hard ass when I'm talking about this, but like you have to be serious, but you also have to have fun.
I love it.
Like you have to be able to ride the waves. And so the community aspect of Brickyard matters a ton. So how do we give all of our founders upside in each other? So we actually found a way. We carved off 1/10 of our carry in Fund 1, and we'll do this for all of our funds going forward. and we're issuing units of ownership in the GP to all of the founders that join us. And so our founders actually have they have material upside in each other, and it sort of
Oh, wow.
drives that sort of culture of look, we're all taking this really seriously. And we're building up sort of an immune system where, before we do a deal, we say, look, like if you're not 100% in, please don't take our money. And we should also mention, like, if you fall below the low watermark of sort of intensity around, how serious you're taking your company, it's not our job to tell you when you're not performing, up to snuff, but we are accountable to all the other teams that we've brought in here and promised that we're going to surround them by, founders that are really serious operators. And if you fall below that low watermark, we'll ask you to leave. We won't ask for your money back or our money back, but we have to be accountable to the community. So it sort of just sets a set of principles where every Brickyard team is just taking this really seriously. It's sort of like very counter, just the zero interest rate phenomenon of the last 10 years where founders have been like kind of loose around, how they treated this thing.
Yeah, it's become a sort of a go to demo day, raise $2 or $3 million, and just kind of burn $50,000 a month until you run out of money kind of industry. And I see this as some of my founders where, we have a YC focus fund. That was my first fund. And, I'd be getting these updates and I'm like, what are you guys doing? I see nothing in this update, and I've seen it now 2 or 3 months in a row. And sure enough, as soon as I asked that question, a month later, it's like, we're going to shut it down. And like, if I didn't ask that question right when I asked it, maybe this thing goes to zero. Maybe they just kind of milk it all the way. At least we got some capital back because I just asked a tough question. Like, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing to grow? What are you guys doing to acquire customers? I don't see anything here. And that's the kind of tough love that you have to give as somebody that runs something like Brickyard or, even a small check writer like Team Ignite. It's like, you just have to look, say, what are you doing to grow here? Are you into this?
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, the fact is, it's like, the problem is, venture capital has attracted so many sort of like, posers is not the right term, but it's like, I attribute the problem to the venture capitalists that have like tried to make it this sexy thing. And it's like not this sexy thing.
And we came out of this era of easy money too.
Right. And I mean, that's why this has happened, is like, it was just investors stopped taking it seriously too, And so, and I mean, it's being a founder is not for everybody. It's just not. And a lot of founders who get into the space and realize what it is, and they realize they don't want to be in the trenches, battling for their life for the next decade.
Turns out this is hard.
And this is hard. Yeah. So our take is like, we make it really clear up front, like what it actually takes. Like some of my most successful friends have built way bigger companies than I have. It's taken everything from them. At the end of the run, it's like they're pumped that they did it, but they also look back and like the relationships that broke down over the last decade because they just couldn't be present. The time that they didn't have with, it's like, the 5 F's.
Yeah.
So you got like faith, family, finances, fitness, and one other.
Food, maybe, and diet.
Faith, family, finances, fitness, and something.
Yeah.
Regular people get 3 things to focus on. Founders only get 2 of those. And so it's, and one of them's already selected for you, right? The finances part, like your business.
Yeah.
And so you really have one other thing that you can provide, real focus for. And it's hard. Yeah. I mean, it's, feel like I'm beating a dead horse.
I think back to, a couple startups I tried, I had the same problem. Was, I was already a father of a couple little boys, and I just wasn't willing to make the sacrifice to make it work. I saw that it was something. I could make it work, but I wasn't willing to make the sacrifice. If in my heart of hearts, I knew that, when I tell founders like, I had a company and I shut it down, that's why I just wasn't willing to sacrifice the family part to make it work. And I literally would have to miss my kids' lives. That's why you either have to, probably be early in your life and not have kids, or late in your life. I was just talking to another founder in our portfolio, and he's an empty nester, right? He's been around the software game for decades now, probably in his 50s or 60s on his fifth startup, and he can put in the time, right? He can make the sacrifices because he really loves the work, but his kids aren't around to, have as one of the F's to fail, right?
Totally. I mean, I was just lucky to not have had kids until we were really late in the game at Bellhop. Um, and it's not impossible, but it sure is hard. I'll tell you, it's like having two families. It really is. It's really difficult. There's no way around that.
So what's the capacity of Brickyard? How many teams can you take on at once, and what's that kind of graduation versus new team coming in process look like?
So we're about a third of the way full in Brickyard. So we want, our vision for Brickyard is it's packed tight. And I think max capacity in Brickyard in terms of being like a functional workspace, probably 80 or 90. And we're like 35. We're like our daily numbers, like 35 in the building. Over the next year, we'll probably get to like 55, 60. Within 2 years, we'll be at max capacity. And but there's no cohorts, so it's really it's a revolving door.
It just
So
kind
we
of rolls
constantly
on
have
and
teams
off, right?
coming in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and we wanted it that way for, there was a trade-off. Like if you do cohorts, there's like a real bond that you get when you like go into something together with a bunch of other teams. But what we wanted is sort of the hierarchy of like new teams coming in. You're kind of like at the bottom of the totem pole, and then you're watching a team go and like raise their Series A, and you're like, whoa, okay, like
Nice.
we can do that.
Yeah.
Like they just
Yeah.
did it. We can do that. So
There's a little bit of knowledge sharing
sort of,
too. When everybody's at the same exact stage, you're all struggling with the exact same problems at the same time. But if you have teams that are 18 months ahead of you, you can learn from them.
Totally. Yeah. And a lot of it's just like when you see a peer do something that you are wanting to do, it's just like, oh, I can do this. They just did it. Like they're not better than me. They're just a year further down the road than I am, So that's a really important part of it. But yeah, I mean, I think it probably nets out at 25 teams in Brickyard at a time. And we will sort of start asking teams to leave like once they are at like, 4 or 5 people, 6 people. So maybe it's like 20 teams at a time. We just don't know. Like we don't actually know how this space is going to live. But we want teams to be here for a significant amount of time. 2 years is probably like the right amount of time to where you can like really sort of root yourself in like radical focus.
Yeah, sorry. So like if you go deploy 20 million in capital, how many teams is that over like what period of time?
The fund that we're investing out of, which is Fund 2, we call it Fund 1, but it's Fund 2. That'll be between 35 and 40 companies that we invest in over 3.5 years or so.
Got it.
And so we're doing about 10 deals a year, and then we'll do a Fund 3, and we'll keep going after that. So about a team, a team every like 6 weeks or so, rolling into Brickyard 5-6 weeks, is the cadence that we've been on for the last 2 years. And we'll probably keep that up.
Yeah, I love that. So how did your experiences at Bellhop and before that kind of inform how you run Brickyard? I mean, you've talked a lot about it, but tell us about that journey and kind of some of those takeaways and lessons that you now instill on the participants, teams that come through Brickyard.
Bellhop was such an amazing business to build, but it was so hard. Oh my gosh. You're talking, you're operating in 3 states, with contractor base of 9,000 contractors that are, your movers that are going into customers' homes during like a hyper emotional time, where like, if the truck doesn't show up for a move, like it's not like your taco not getting delivered. It's like your customers' lives are on hold. So it's super high impact, really difficult. And it was like just lay brick. Like that's our motto. Like that's our URL. It was just such a grind through seed, through Series A, through Series B, C, D. Like it was just a grind. And having gone through that, we're naturally sort of drawn to teams that are like ready to do that. We're not competing for allocation and like the new hottest like social, startup that is experiencing like hyper growth because they just nailed the product and have lightning in a bottle, and their founders are like, I don't know why it's growing. It's just growing. This is great. That's just, those aren't the types of founders that we're, drawn to. I think we're probably
Right.
more like gluttons for punishment around like going after founders that are, and so, I think the experience of building Bellhop really sort of rooted us in the real great companies are built through sacrifice and strife and pain, suffering, and and I think that's why you're probably hearing a lot of of that come out on like when we describe Brickyard. It sounds probably like a terrible place. Like it's actually an amazing, like when everybody's like sort of bought into to one set of like rules, or not rules. There's no rules, but like a set of like laws of physics. There's like such a shared pride between our teams. Like, yeah, we're a Brickyard team. Like, yeah, of course we're, oh, we lost a big contract. Good. All right. Something good's going to come. Let's go.
Take next step. Yeah.
And, yeah. So,
what do you think it is about your background
very stylistically
that created this grittiness that you have?
I mean, it's just bellhops. It was that. I mean, it was, that was 10 years. It was a grind. Amazing, like absolutely amazing experience, but no part of it was easy. And I think most of your really successful founders have built, even much bigger companies than me. Like there's just like I've never met like a really hyper successful founder that just isn't so gritty, just you just can't stop them. But also it's like, it's very much like front loaded in a business. Like at least later on, once you start raising real capital in some of your growth rounds, you have the resources to hire really amazing teams that can kind of take some of the like grit load off. And I don't want to say all of it, because it's always hard. Your problems get harder, but your team gets better. But like in the early days, when you're battling towards product market fit, it's like no one's getting to PMF by working smart. Like no one. They're getting to PMF because they literally manifested this thing into being. And I think that's why we're focused in that stage. I think the grit part is particularly relevant pre-product market fit.
Let's switch to rapid fire. We'd love to ask you some quick questions and get your initial thoughts and responses. Brick or mortar, what's more important for a startup? Is it the idea or the execution? I think I know the answer to this.
It's Yeah, I mean, it's execution, right? Yes, no question.
Do you think it's like, do you feel like it's the team, or is it just the grittiness when you're kind of assessing like, oh yeah, these founders like went to Ivy League schools and obviously they've been working really hard, or is it something kind of in their background where you're like, or is it just what they say? Do you have to? I guess when you're assessing these founders, is it explicit or implicit? Because you can have a founder that says like, yeah, I want to work 80 hours a week. That sounds great to me. Or you could, or they could say that, and then you can kind of, I don't know, maybe peer into their soul a little bit. Like, what is that peer into the
I mean,
soul aspect?
that's all that's all it's like finding PMF. Like PMF is never just obvious. You know, it's the same way like finding like founder market fit. You're looking for like sort of the same thing, you know. When you're looking for founder market fit, it's like little really nuanced signals that tell you, okay, this is legit. This guy's not just this girl's not just saying this. Like she means this to her core. And usually they're like little subtleties that you pick up in conversation. And that's, you know, every one of our teams, when we get to like, okay, we're serious about doing an investment in this team, our teams have to fly in. So we fly every one of our teams into Brickyard, and we spend an entire day with them. So we go to lunch, and then we spend 4 or 5 hours in a room with them.
Before you let them in. So that's like the second stage of the interview process.
Well, that's post diligence. That's post all of our like diligence stuff. This is like kind of the final check.
Yeah.
And so they have to come and spend a day, and 50% of the time we don't do a deal. And so it's usually you just pick up on little subtleties of like, you know, it's usually a subtlety of like work culture, or just expectation around like what this is really going to take. And like they could check all the boxes virtually, but when you get them in person, you know, if they're spending half their time telling us about, you know, how they like to spend 40 days a year, you know, skiing in Vail, it's probably not, you know, going to work out. Like that's not that's not what we're going for.
So thinking about kind of round composition as someone applies to the program or Brickyard, do you like to come in early in the round, mid round, late round? Does that matter to you at all?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we love to be the first check-in and pre-seed team. You know, if it's a really early check-in, let's say we're like the first 300 or 400K in the company, and they're raising $1.5 million or something, we have no problem being the first check if we know that the founder is going to be able to raise the capital, you know. And sort of like one of our box checks is like, are we willing to completely open up our network to this founder? Like would we introduce this person to Bill Gurley? You know, not saying Bill Gurley's, you know, that's not, he's not somebody I talk to all the time. I'm saying, would you burn every connection that you have to make an introduction with this founder? If the answer is yes, then like you should do the deal, because they're probably going to get the round done if you can do that. If I can introduce them.
Yeah, I love that check. I actually have
10,
that.
20, 30, 50.
I love that. I actually have that check in
so
my due diligence as well.
So
would I have them on the podcast? Would I introduce them to my VC friends? Yeah, I love that check.
I don't know. I think you pretty much covered it. You know, I think what we're doing is either, you know, our thesis is very heavy on, you know, what happens when a founder's super radically focused. They're in person with their co-founders. They're around a bunch of other founders that have been vetted by us. You know, they've quote burned the ships, and they're willing to put in an extreme amount of work. Like, we're either going to be right that is conducive to, you know, a founder getting to, you know, their next round of funding, and probably directionally right in those founders being able to have what it takes to you know, get over the finish line over the course of a decade, or we're going to be wrong, and that's not actually important. And our thesis is, you know, if that does actually matter, we're going to be wildly right. And
right.
Those are the things that we just won't, you know, compromise on. if building businesses gets way easier, with AI agents, and maybe there is a whole new world where, like, I'm just some old curmudgeon, old school kind of operator, that's just irrelevant. I don't think that's going to be the case, but we will certainly see.
I love that about venture. There's so many nooks and crannies of it that there's lots of wrong ways to do it, but there's no one right way to do it, right? Everybody has a different thesis and a different way of adding value and a different niche that they carve out. And I think you guys have found something really unique that is suited to your backgrounds and your ethos and your work ethic, and it'll probably work. I mean, in my assessment. But I love how there's 1,000 shades of venture, and there's just no
1,000 ways to skin a cat.
There's lots of wrong ways, like
there's
I said.
Truly,
there's lots of right ways as well. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, 1,000 ways to skin a cat. That's what I've that's one of the things that I didn't fully conceptualize, having been on the other side of this table for the last 10 years as an operator, is being a good investor is just having some unique insight that you're super consistent on, and you are either right or you're wrong.
What is going on down there in Chattanooga? Why is it such a place? I heard there was like a lot of historic money there or something. What is that? How'd you end up there? Is that where you're from, or?
No, I grew up in Knoxville, about an hour and a half north. Yeah, I mean, Chattanooga just totally punches above its weight. I mean, we have, I mean, I guess there's a few things. The city is super awesome. Like, it's the Boulder of the South, except we have two Denvers. We've got Atlanta and Nashville. And then we have Birmingham and Knoxville that are, all within, all those four cities are all within 2 hours. And Chattanooga has the best access to the outdoors in the South. And it's just a really, like, authentically cool place. I mean, I would probably liken it to Austin, 25 years ago, very boulderish. So the city is cool. And then on top of that, we have a lot. It's a really gritty place. Like, this is an old, like, manufacturing town, super heavy in supply chain and logistics. Like, more freight comes through here than comes through Chicago. The city started doubling down on innovative, sort of like longer term games when they, we were the first city to put in municipal fiber. So we now have, a 10 gig municipal fiber and a smart grid. We're actually working right now on being the first city to bring a quantum computer to the city and give access. We're trying to get a node for Brickyard, actually. But like, beyond that, public and private is just rowing in the same direction. Like, there's just a really healthy ecosystem where everybody just wants the same thing. And it's a pretty magic place.
I need to come down. I'll manufacture a reason to come down at some point.
Dude, you're welcome. Anytime you want to come down to Brickyard, I mean, come spend a day, 2 days, a week, whatever. You're welcome.
Yeah, I will definitely take you up on that offer at some point. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, Cam. Thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time. It was really great getting to know you better and know Brickyard better. And now I know why the deal flow is so good. I have a lot of insight. I'm sure any founders out there that find this podcast will self-select and apply to Brickyard. So maybe before we sign off, tell them how they can find you. Justlaybrick.com, I assume, and just go through the front door, or get an intro from someone like me. Any way else?
I mean, the best way to get in with us is through one of our founder referral. One of our teams. That if you know one of our teams, that's an easy way to get a meeting with us. But also, we look at an insane amount of cold inbound. And so, don't hesitate to just throw your deck in the site. Like, we look at everything. So there's that. Follow me on Twitter, Cam Doody, CamDoody, on X, I guess. Just Lay Brick that's our site. And if you're in Chattanooga, you're also welcome to come and meet up with us in person.
Thank you so much, Cam. Really appreciate it.
I loved it, Brian.